The massive Guardian warship hung in space like a dark cloud, its black metal hull absorbing the light from nearby stars. Inside the observation deck, Captain Stone watched the recorded footage for the third time. The screen showed a Guardian warrior tearing through a reinforced metal door as if it were paper. The creature's natural armor gleamed under the emergency lights, its massive form dwarfing the local security forces who fired their weapons in panic. Stone paused the recording and leaned back in his chair. 20 years in the Earth Defense Force hadn't prepared him for this. The Guardians had appeared 6 months ago, and since then, they had conquered 3 advanced civilizations with ease. Their bodies were living weapons, evolved from apex predators on their harsh homeworld. Each Guardian stood nearly 10 feet tall, protected by natural armor plates that could deflect energy weapons, and possessed strength that made military robots look like toys. Sir, his assistant, Walker, entered the room with a data tablet. Another report from the outer colonies. The Guardians just took control of the Blue Star system. No survivors among the defending forces. Stone nodded slowly, his weathered face showing no emotion. How many ships? Just 2, sir. That's all they needed. Walker's voice trembled slightly. The Blue Star Defense Fleet had 15 warships. The Guardians, they just walked through them. The captain stood up and walked to the window, his reflection pale against the darkness of space. The Guardians were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Most alien species they'd met had evolved along similar paths, some stronger, some weaker, but all within a reasonable range. The Guardians were different. They were living tanks, and they knew it. Have you seen their victory broadcasts? Stone asked, still looking out at the stars. They don't even bother with demands anymore. They just arrive, announce their presence, and expect immediate surrender. The scary part is, until now, that's exactly what they've gotten. Walker placed the tablet on the desk. The Council wants to know our assessment of Earth's chances if they turn their attention to us. They're meeting in an hour. Stone turned around, his eyes fixed on the paused image of the Guardian warrior. Show them this footage. Then show them the population numbers. He pressed a button, and a new set of data appeared on the screen. The Guardians have conquered 12 systems in the past decade. In each case, they faced species that had significant military forces. In each case, those forces were crushed within days. But, sir, Walker hesitated. Shouldn't we give them some hope? Stone smiled for the first time that day. I'm not finished. Show them this next. He pulled up another file, this one showing human historical footage. Ancient battles, guerrilla warfare, urban combat, and space skirmishes flashed across the screen. The Guardians are strong, I'll give them that, but they've never faced anything like us. He walked back to his desk and pulled out a worn notebook, an old habit he kept even in this digital age. Every species they've conquered so far had one thing in common. They evolved to be specialists. The Blue Star people had enhanced intelligence but fragile bodies. The Ringworlders had incredible lifespans but slow reproduction. Even the Guardians themselves are specialists, perfectly evolved killing machines. Walker looked confused. And that helps us how? Because, Walker, Stone said, opening his notebook, humans are different. We didn't evolve to be the strongest, the smartest, or the fastest. We evolved to be adaptable. We're the species that survived by outsmarting bigger predators, that learned to live in every environment our world could throw at us. The Guardians are stronger than us. Fine. We'll find a way around that strength. An alert sounded from the computer. New footage was coming in. Stone pulled it up, and they watched as a Guardian ship approached a small mining outpost in the Proxima system. The first human colony about to face these unstoppable warriors. Send word to command, Stone said, his voice firm. Tell them to watch this encounter very carefully. The Guardians think they're invincible because they've never lost. But they've never met a species that turned their weaknesses into weapons, never faced an enemy that adapted faster than they could attack. They've never met humans. Walker nodded and hurried out, leaving Stone alone with the live feed. The Guardian ship was beginning its attack run on the mining colony. Stone didn't smile, but there was a glint in his eye. The Guardians were about to learn a very important lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the strongest, but the one that refuses to play by the rules. Commander Gray stood at the mining colony's control center, watching as the massive Guardian ship descended through the thin atmosphere of Proxima b. Around her, 30 miners grabbed whatever weapons they could find: mining lasers, plasma cutters, and even a few old-fashioned projectile rifles. They weren't soldiers, but they were humans, and humans had a long history of turning tools into weapons. They're broadcasting their demands, her communications officer, Reed, announced. The message was simple: immediate surrender or complete destruction. The same message that had brought 12 other civilizations to their knees. Gray clicked on her comm unit. All stations, remember the plan. Let them think they've got us cornered. She looked at the colony's layout on her screen. A maze of underground tunnels, processing plants, and storage facilities. Not much against living tanks, but it would have to do. The Guardian ship landed, its black hull making the colony's buildings look like toys. The loading ramp descended, and out walked 3 Guardian warriors, each nearly 10 feet tall. Their leader, whom they would later learn was called Overlord Rex, stepped forward. His natural armor plates shifted as he moved, catching the light of Proxima Centauri. "This is your final warning." Rex's voice boomed through external speakers. "Submit to Guardian rule or be eliminated." Gray pressed a button on her console. A white flag rose above the main building. The Guardians moved forward, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Just as they reached the main entrance, Gray smiled and pressed another button. The ground beneath the Guardians' feet suddenly gave way. The mining colony's waste disposal system opened up, dropping the massive warriors into a pit of industrial lubricant. Their natural armor, evolved for grip and traction, became worse than useless in the slippery substance. "Now," Gray shouted into her comm. Miners positioned on the surrounding buildings opened fire with their mining lasers. The beams, designed to cut through rock, focused on the joints between the Guardians' armor plates, the weak spots Captain Stone's team had identified from studying previous footage. The Guardians roared in rage and surprise. They tried to stand, but the lubricant made their movements clumsy. One of them managed to raise his weapon, only to have it short-circuit from a precise hit by a plasma cutter. More Guardian warriors poured from their ship, but they found themselves facing an enemy that had turned the entire colony into a weapon. Pressure hoses normally used for cleaning equipment now blasted them with debilitating force. Mining explosives detonated in carefully planned sequences, not to kill but to disorient and separate the Guardian forces. "They're retreating to regroup," Reed called out. "But their ship is powering up its main weapons." Gray had expected this. "Tunnel team, you're up." Deep beneath the surface, a team of miners had spent the last hour positioning their heaviest drilling equipment. They activated their machines simultaneously, sending vibrations through the planet's crust. The Guardian ship, designed to withstand attacks from above, hadn't been built to handle seismic interference. Its sensors scrambled, unable to lock onto targets. "Keep up the pressure," Gray ordered. "Don't let them adapt." The battle raged for hours. The Guardians, used to quick victories through overwhelming force, found themselves caught in a war of attrition against an enemy that seemed to have endless tricks. Every time they adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to another. Finally, Overlord Rex raised his hand. "Hold," he commanded his forces. The Guardians, their armor stained and damaged, looked at their leader in shock. Never before had they been forced to call a halt to an attack. "You," Rex pointed at the main building, "commander of this facility. Show yourself." Gray walked out onto a balcony, still holding her mining laser, ready to talk like civilized beings. Rex's massive form straightened. "You are not warriors. This is not a military installation. How did you? We're humans, Gray interrupted. We don't need to be warriors to fight. We don't need military installations to defend ourselves. Give us a problem, and we'll find a solution. Give us tools, and we'll make weapons. Back on Earth, we have a saying. Necessity is the mother of invention. The Guardian leader was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. We will withdraw. But this is not over. No, Gray agreed, watching as the battered Guardian forces retreated to their ship. This is just the beginning. As the Guardian ship lifted off, Gray activated her long-range communicator. Captain Stone, you're going to want to hear about this. We just gave the Guardians their first bloody nose, and we did it with mining equipment. The Guardian War Council chamber fell silent as Overlord Rex finished playing the recording from the mining colony battle. The massive warriors sat around a black stone table, their armor still bearing scars from various encounters with humans. Blade, Rex's chief advisor, stood up, his claws scratching marks into the table's surface. Impossible, Blade growled. A group of miners with primitive tools could not have done this to our elite warriors. He pointed at the screen, where footage showed Guardians slipping and falling in the industrial lubricant. Some of the younger council members shifted uncomfortably at the embarrassing sight. Rex played another recording, this time from a different human encounter. This was 3 days ago. A human cargo ship approached one of our patrols. We thought it was an easy target. The footage showed the cargo ship suddenly splitting apart, revealing hidden weapon ports. The Guardian patrol, expecting standard cargo ship defenses, was caught completely off guard by the barrage of modified mining explosives. They adapt, Rex said quietly. Every time we face them, they use different tactics. They learn from each encounter and change their approach. He pressed another button, bringing up analysis data. Look at their history. Unlike us, they didn't evolve to be perfect warriors. They evolved to survive by adapting. In a different part of space, Captain Stone was giving a similar briefing to Earth's military command. He stood before a group of generals and admirals, showing them footage from various Guardian encounters. The Guardians have 3 main weaknesses, Stone explained. First, their natural armor, while incredibly strong, has weak points at the joints. Second, their size and strength work against them in certain environments. And third, most importantly, they're predictable. Admiral Wells, a veteran of many space battles, leaned forward. Predictable how? Stone pulled up tactical displays from multiple Guardian battles. They always follow the same pattern. Direct confrontation, overwhelming force, demand for surrender. They've never had to think differently because, until now, it always worked. But humans, he smiled. We wrote the book on thinking differently. Back in the Guardian Council chamber, Blade was becoming increasingly agitated. Then we'll crush them with numbers. Send our entire fleet. We tried that yesterday, Rex replied. At their colony in the beta system, he played one final recording, and even Blade fell silent. The footage showed a massive Guardian fleet approaching the human colony, but instead of fighting back directly, the humans had filled space around their colony with thousands of small drones. The drones didn't attack. They just broadcast human military history. The Guardian fleet's communication channels were flooded with images of human battles throughout history. Ancient humans taking down larger predators with simple traps. Warriors on horseback using mobility to defeat larger armies. Guerrilla fighters defeating superior forces through ambush and deception. Modern soldiers using terrain and weather to their advantage. They didn't just show us these things, Rex said. They were telling us something. This is what we do. We adapt. We overcome. We survive. In Earth's command center, Stone was reaching the end of his presentation. The Guardians are learning fear for the first time, he said. Not fear of death. They've always known that. They're learning to fear uncertainty. Every human ship might be a trap. Every seeming weakness might be a trick. Every battle might bring some new, unexpected tactic. Admiral Wells nodded slowly. and that's affecting their performance. Look at their recent battles. Stone brought up fresh data. Their attacks are becoming hesitant. They're second-guessing themselves. Their greatest strength was their absolute confidence, and we're taking that away. A young officer raised her hand. But sir, they're still incredibly powerful. Their ships and weapons are far advanced, and physically they're much stronger. Stone smiled. Tell me, Lieutenant, have you heard of the monkey trap? Natives would hollow out a coconut, put food inside, and chain it to a tree. The monkey would reach in and grab the food, but with its fist closed, it couldn't pull its hand out. The monkey was trapped not by the coconut, but by its own refusal to let go. He looked around the room. The Guardians are trapped by their own strength. They can't imagine fighting any other way. But we can. We will. And that's why they're starting to fear us. In the Guardian Council chamber, Rex watched his warriors argue about how to deal with the human threat. For the first time in his long life, he felt something new. Doubt. The humans weren't just fighting them. They were changing the rules of war itself. And the Guardians, for all their strength, didn't know how to play this new game. Captain Stone stood in the cargo hold of what appeared to be a simple merchant ship, surrounded by 20 of Earth's best Special Forces operators. Their small frames, dwarfed by the massive shipping containers around them, didn't look impressive. But Stone knew appearances could be deceiving, something the Guardians were learning the hard way. Operation Thunderstrike begins in 10 minutes, Stone announced, checking his equipment one last time. Remember, we're not here to outfight them. We're here to outsmart them. The plan was simple, though executing it would be anything but. Their ship, registered as a civilian trader, was approaching one of the Guardians' main supply bases. Intelligence gathered from previous encounters had revealed something interesting. The Guardians' natural armor made them nearly invincible to frontal attacks, but it also made them overheat easily. The ship's captain spoke through the intercom. Guardian Control Tower is hailing us. Beginning docking procedures. Stone nodded to his team. They were all wearing environmental suits that looked like standard cargo worker gear. The Guardians had grown used to seeing smaller species working as traders and laborers. It was one of their blind spots. They never imagined these lesser beings could be a threat. As the ship docked, Stone's team moved into position. The Guardians had a standard procedure for inspecting merchant vessels. 2 warriors would board through the main airlock, check the cargo manifests, and perform a basic sweep. They never bothered with detailed inspections. Why would they? No one had ever dared to challenge them directly. The airlock cycled, and 2 Guardian warriors ducked through the door. Each was nearly 10 feet tall, their natural armor gleaming under the ship's lights. Stone watched through a hidden camera as they began their inspection, moving with the casual confidence of apex predators. Now, Stone whispered into his comm unit. The ship's environmental controls suddenly switched to maximum heat. At the same time, hidden panels in the cargo containers opened, revealing industrial heating units, the same kind used in metal foundries. The temperature in the cargo hold shot up rapidly. The Guardians noticed the change immediately, but didn't realize its significance until it was too late. Their armor, evolved to protect against attacks, trapped the heat inside. Within minutes, they were struggling to move, their movements becoming sluggish. Stone's team emerged from hiding, wearing their cooling-equipped suits. They didn't attack directly. Instead, they used handheld sonic devices, another weakness discovered through careful study. The Guardians' enhanced hearing, usually an advantage, became a liability as the high-frequency sound disrupted their balance. Base security will be here soon, Stone's second-in-command warned. Right on schedule, Stone replied. The Guardians were nothing if not predictable. They would follow their standard response protocol, send a full squad to investigate, and when that squad arrived, they would find the cargo hold doors sealed, trapping them in the superheated chamber. Through the ship's cameras, Stone watched as more Guardian warriors rushed into the trap. Their strength and armor meant nothing as the heat sapped their energy, and the sonic weapons kept them disoriented. Within minutes, an entire Guardian security team, warriors who had conquered entire worlds, were incapacitated without a single direct shot being fired. Stone led his team through the now empty base corridors. The few Guardians they encountered were quickly dealt with using the same tactics: heat, sound, and quick movement. The humans' smaller size, previously a disadvantage, allowed them to duck into maintenance shafts and service corridors too small for Guardian warriors. They reached the base's main computer core within 20 minutes. While his team planted charges, Stone uploaded a message to the Guardian network. It was a simple video showing how his team had defeated the Guardian warriors, not through strength, but through understanding and exploiting their weaknesses. Charges set, his demolitions expert reported. Stone took one last look at the Guardian base. "Remember this day," he said to no one in particular. This is when they learn that being the strongest doesn't mean being invincible. The human team retreated to their ship, leaving behind a base full of overheated, disoriented Guardian warriors. As they broke orbit, the charges detonated, destroying the base's key systems. But the physical damage wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the message now spreading through Guardian space. The invincible warriors had been defeated by beings they considered weak, and the galaxy would never be the same. On the bridge of their departing ship, Stone received a transmission from Earth Command. More bases had been hit simultaneously across Guardian space, each attack exploiting different weaknesses. The Guardians were learning a harsh lesson. While they had spent generations becoming the perfect warriors, humans had spent generations learning how to defeat perfect warriors. Admiral Wells watched from the bridge of her flagship as the Guardian fleet approached Proxima Station. The massive alien ships moved in their usual tight formation, a display of power that had terrified countless civilizations. But this time, something was different. Their movements were cautious, hesitant. "They're scanning for traps," her tactical officer reported, running full sensor sweeps on every piece of debris. Wells smiled. The Guardians were learning, but they were learning the wrong lessons. They were looking for the kinds of tricks humans had used before, not realizing that humans never used the same trick twice. "Launch Operation Ghost," she ordered. Across the battlefield, hundreds of small pods ejected from hidden positions in the asteroid field. The Guardian ships immediately turned their weapons toward them, expecting another drone attack. Instead, the pods burst open, releasing clouds of reflective material, simple strips of metal that filled space around their fleet. The Guardian sensors, designed to detect energy weapons and solid objects, went haywire. Each piece of metal reflected their scanning beams, creating thousands of false readings. Their perfect formation began to break as ships maneuvered to avoid phantom threats. Phase 2, Wells commanded. The real attack came not from the front, where the Guardians had concentrated their defenses, but from below. Human ships, hidden beneath a layer of sensor-absorbing material, rose up from their hiding places near Proxima's magnetic field. Their weapons had been modified based on data from previous encounters, calibrated to exploit gaps in Guardian shield frequencies. On the Guardian command ship, Blade paced furiously. "Return fire. Show them our strength." But strength was no longer enough. The human ships didn't engage in traditional combat. They darted in and out of the reflective cloud, striking from unexpected angles, then disappearing again. Each attack targeted a different weakness. Some hit shield generators, others went for sensor arrays, and some simply added more reflective material to the chaos. "Sir," Blade's second-in-command reported, "our ships can't maintain formation. We can't tell what's real and what's a reflection." The Guardian response was predictable. They tried to power through the confusion with brute force, firing their massive weapons at every possible threat. But this only made things worse. Their energy weapons reflected off the metal cloud, creating even more chaos. Wells watched as the mighty Guardian fleet, which had never known defeat, began to fall apart. "They still don't understand," she said to her bridge crew. "They think if they're strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough, They can overcome any obstacle. They haven't learned that sometimes the obstacle isn't meant to be overcome. It's meant to be avoided. The battle continued for hours. The Guardian fleet, unable to effectively target the human ships or coordinate their movements, began taking heavy damage. Their mighty weapons were useless against enemies they couldn't properly see, and their strong shields meant nothing when attacks came through gaps they didn't know existed. Finally, Blade gave the order to retreat. As the Guardian ships tried to withdraw, they'd faced one final surprise. The human fleet had maneuvered them into Proxima's stronger magnetic field, where their advanced navigation systems began to fail. Several ships collided in their rush to escape, adding to the humiliation of their defeat. Back on her bridge, Wells received reports from across the battlefield. The humans had lost some ships, but the victories far outweighed the losses. More importantly, they had proven that Guardian technology, like Guardian biology, could be turned against itself. "Send word to Earth Command," she ordered. "Tell them Phase 5 is complete. The Guardians now know they can be beaten not just on the ground, but in space too." As she watched the Guardian fleet limp away, Wells thought about how the battle represented everything that made humans different. They hadn't won through superior strength or advanced technology. They had won by understanding their environment, adapting their tactics, and turning their enemy's strength into a weakness. A message came in from one of her captains. "Admiral, our sensors show some Guardian ships are staying behind, watching us. What should we do?" "Let them watch," Wells replied. "Let them see what happens when you fight humans. Let them wonder what we'll do next. Because that fear, that uncertainty, it's more powerful than any weapon they have." Captain Stone stood before the Earth Defense Council, but he wasn't alone. Next to him stood representatives from 3 different alien species, former slaves of the Guardian Empire. Their presence in the council chamber would have been unthinkable just months ago. "The Guardians are losing control," Stone reported, pointing to a map of known space. Red dots showed where Guardian forces had been defeated, yellow marked systems where their control was slipping. Their defeat at Proxima Station changed everything. Other species are beginning to resist. The alien representative from the Ring World stepped forward. His long, graceful form moved with careful precision. "For generations, we believed the Guardians were invincible, but humans showed us something remarkable. That strength alone does not guarantee victory." On the Guardian homeworld, similar discussions were taking place, but with a very different tone. Blade stood before the High Council, his armor bearing fresh battle scars. "Overlord Rex has failed us," he roared. "His cautious approach to the human problem has made us look weak." The council chamber erupted in shouts and arguments. Rex remained silent, watching as his former advisor called for his removal. The humans hadn't just challenged their military might. They had shaken the very foundation of Guardian society. "The old ways are failing," Blade continued. "We must crush these humans with everything we have. No more clever tactics, no more careful planning. Pure, overwhelming force." Back on Earth, Stone was explaining the latest developments to the Council. "Our intelligence suggests the Guardians are facing internal conflict. Their leadership is divided between those who want to adapt and those who want to double down on their traditional methods." "And how does this help us?" one of the council members asked. The Rain World representative answered before Stone could. "Because they're facing something they've never encountered before: doubt. Their society is built on the belief in their own superiority. Now that belief is cracking." Messages were arriving daily from other enslaved species. Some offered intelligence about Guardian movements. Others provided access to secret supply routes or hidden weaknesses in Guardian technology. Each message carried the same underlying theme: we want to be free. In the Guardian Council chamber, Rex finally stood to address his people. "Look at what is happening," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "While we argue among ourselves, our enemies grow stronger. The humans aren't just fighting us. They're teaching others to fight us." Blade stepped forward, his massive form towering even over other Guardians. "Then let them come. Let them all come. We are the Guardians. We have never been defeated. We had never been defeated, Rex corrected, until we met humans. And do you know why they defeated us? Because they don't fight like we do. They don't think like we do. Every time we adapt to their tactics, they change them. The argument might have continued, but alarms suddenly blared throughout the chamber. Reports were coming in from across Guardian space. Coordinated uprisings on a dozen worlds. The Rainworlders had shut down key transportation hubs. The Blue Star people had disabled communication relays. Even the smallest slave species were playing their parts. And behind it all were the humans, providing tactical advice, sharing technology, teaching others how to exploit Guardian weaknesses. They had turned the Guardian Empire's greatest strength, its size, into a weakness by giving its enemies too many targets to defend. Blade's response was predictable: send the fleet to crush each rebellion. But as the Guardian ships departed, they found themselves facing not just human tactics, but human-inspired resistance from every species they had ever oppressed. On Earth, Stone watched the reports come in. The Guardians were still incredibly dangerous, perhaps even more so now that they were desperate, but they were no longer invincible. Their aura of invincibility had been broken not by a stronger enemy, but by one that showed others how to be strong in different ways. The final battle is coming, Stone told the Council. The Guardians won't accept defeat easily. They'll gather everything they have for one last attempt to prove their superiority. The alien representatives nodded in agreement. They knew the Guardians better than anyone. The coming battle wouldn't just be for victory. It would be for the future of the galaxy itself. The Guardian homeworld loomed large in the view screen of Earth's flagship. Admiral Wells stood at the command center, surrounded by representatives from a dozen alien species. The combined fleet of former slave races and human ships stretched out before them, preparing for the final battle. Captain Stone's voice came through the comm system from his position on one of the forward ships. Guardian fleet approaching. They're not holding anything back this time. He was right. Every Guardian ship, every warrior, every weapon had been gathered for this last stand. Their formation was different now, no longer the precise, orderly patterns they'd used before. This was a desperate charge by a species that had finally learned fear. They still don't understand, Wells said quietly. Even now, they think this is about strength. The Guardian fleet was led by Blade's massive dreadnought. He had taken control after Rex and his supporters had been imprisoned for suggesting peace talks. The new Guardian leader believed that enough force, enough violence, would solve any problem. All ships, execute Pattern Delta, Wells commanded. The combined fleet split apart, forming smaller, more mobile groups. Each group contained ships from different species, each contributing their unique strengths. Human tactical expertise, Rainworlder sensor technology, Blue Star energy systems, all working together. The Guardian fleet opened fire, their massive weapons lighting up space. But the Allied ships didn't fight back directly. Instead, they implemented tactics that humans had spent months teaching them. Small, fast ships darted between the Guardian vessels, causing them to hit each other in their attempts to target the nimble crafts. On his command ship, Blade raged at his crew. Destroy them. Show them our power. But power wasn't enough anymore. The Allies had learned from humans that true strength came in many forms. Rainworlder ships used their advanced sensors to detect weak points in Guardian shields. Blue Star vessels followed up with precise strikes at those points. Human ships coordinated it all, turning the battle into a dance rather than a brawl. Then came the surprise that would end the war. Deep in the Guardian formation, ships began powering down their weapons. Rex's supporters, who had been quietly spreading through the fleet, chose that moment to act. They had finally understood what humans had been trying to teach them, that true strength meant knowing when not to fight. Blade's voice roared over all channels. Traitors, cowards, I'll destroy you all myself. His dreadnought turned its weapons on his own ships, showing that he would rather destroy his own people than admit defeat. That was when Stone's Special Forces team, who had infiltrated the Guardian homeworld during the chaos, struck. They didn't attack with weapons. Instead, they broadcast to every screen, every communication device in Guardian space, showing the truth. Their leader attacking his own people, driven mad by his inability to accept change. The Guardian formation broke apart completely. Ships either powered down their weapons or turned them on Blade's dreadnought. The mighty Guardian fleet, which had terrorized the galaxy for generations, was defeating itself. In the end, it wasn't a human who ended the battle. A young Guardian officer on Blade's own ship made the final choice. She had seen how humans adapted, how they taught others to be strong in their own ways. She made the decision that would change her species forever. Blade fell, not to superior strength, but to his own people's realization that there were other ways to be strong. The aftermath brought changes nobody had expected. The Guardians, under new leadership that included both Rex's supporters and younger warriors who had learned from humans, joined the alliance they had once tried to destroy. Their strength, once used to dominate, became part of something greater. Admiral Wells and Captain Stone stood in the Earth Defense Council chamber weeks later, watching as representatives from all species, including the Guardians, signed a new treaty. They were feared as the strongest, Stone said, until they encountered humans. And then they learned that being the strongest isn't the same as being the best. Wells nodded. And we learned something too. We learned that our greatest strength isn't our ability to fight. It's our ability to teach others how to be strong in their own way. The galaxy entered a new age. The Guardians learned to use their strength to protect rather than dominate. Other species discovered their own forms of power. And humans? Humans kept doing what they did best, adapting, teaching, and showing that true strength comes in many forms.